Now, very often I get people ask me, what does it take to have a saltwater aquarium? And ultimately, at the end of the day, what it takes is for you to have an aquarium and then to put some salt water in it. If you have an aquarium with salt water in it, then that's a saltwater aquarium. A saltwater aquarium, if you start putting a little bit of food in it, tiny skerrick of food, then that would house a tiny little fish. Bacteria would grow on the side of the tank, and therefore you've got a tiny marine aquarium with a tiny bit of thing in it. The next thing you could do is add a pump. A pump is then going to blow across the surface of the water, agitating the surface, and now you've got something called oxygen. Food is one requirement, salt water is another requirement, oxygen is another requirement. Now you can go and add a little bit more fish to the aquarium. You're increasing your capacity. The next thing we could do is go and put some coral sand on the bottom. Coral sand's got a massive surface area, therefore will grow lots of good bacteria. The good bacteria will break down the waste from the fish, so therefore we've just increased our capacity again. So now we've got a saltwater aquarium, we've got a few fish happily swimming around that are getting food, that are getting oxygen, that are getting their waste broken down. Then we might decide to put a light on the aquarium. And if you get a light source, an LED light, metal halide light, whatever you want, then with the light source we can then start having corals or plants. It's corals. At that point we could also introduce some live rock, for example. So we've got a few bits of live rock in there. The live rock is going to bring microorganisms, bring bacteria, and all of a sudden we've got ourselves a little ecosystem. The light allows us to put a few nice corals into it. Then the next thing we might want to do is put a filter on it. So there's all different types of filters available. My favourite being the sump filter. So let's assume that we had a hole drilled in the back of the aquarium. We had some plumbing going down. We had a bit of mechanical media here, such as polyfilter. And the polyfilter will suck out any waste from the aquarium. Then we've got a return pump. Sends the water back into the tank again. Agitates the surface, gives more oxygen. So we can then add a filter to the tank. Now that allows us to get more fish, more capacity. Then we might put some, so we've got mechanical media here. We might decide to put a heater in the sump. There's your heater. Now we can have tropical fish. Then we might put a block of marine pure here, and that's a biological filter material called marine pure. The marine pure is going to increase our biological capacity again. Now we can get even more stock in the aquarium. So how good your filtration is completely relative to the amount of fish you have versus the amount of maintenance you do on the tank. Then you might come along and want to put a protein skimmer. So we might chuck a protein skimmer here. And what the protein skimmer does is inject tiny fine oxygen bubbles into a reactor, and then suck all the fish waste out into this cup, which is easy to change. So at this point we've got a tank. We've got fish food going into it. So the fish food breaks down by bacteria into ammonia. Then a little bacteria grows on the surface of the rocks, on the surface of the marine pure, on the surface of the sand, and breaks the ammonia into nitrite. These things are toxic. Nitrite breaks down into nitrate. If you don't have parallel denitrification, as in denitrifying bacteria growing in the marine pure, something like live rock to grow denitrifying bacteria inside it, then your nitrate will build up. If you do, then your nitrate has a capacity of getting broken down, especially if you go and get something like a biopellet reactor. What a biopellet reactor does is release catalysts and carbons into the water that allows the nitrate to get broken down. So you might decide to get a biopellet reactor. This is going to lower your maintenance once again, providing you've got a protein skimmer. Now you start getting some more corals. The corals are breaking down organics as well, helping to, consuming, assimilating nutrients. And then you might have a whole lot of corals, and they might be growing really well. You might decide to add something like a calcium reactor on, because the corals are going to pull nutrients out of the water, and So therefore we need something to supplement those nutrients. You can supplement nutrients using supplements, or you can add an extra gizmo onto there, such as a calcium reactor. So all these things, are they necessary? No. Are they going to make your life easier? Yes. Then you might go and buy yourself an RO filter, which connects to your tap, which allows you to have more pure water source. The advantage of having a more pure water source, and you can plumb it in under the aquarium if you get really fancy, and a more pure water source means that you get less nuisance algae, and the whole aquarium tends to run better. Other thing you could do is get a UV sterilizer. So you might put a UV on the return of the filter. So you might have a UV. The advantage of having a UV sterilizer is that every single fish that you introduce to the aquarium can have pathogens. Pathogens, put simply, are just little microorganisms that are capable of making the fish sick. Those pathogens are normally controlled by antigens within the fish. So therefore, when the fish have got a good immune system, got good body slime, then these little pathogens are not a problem. When you get new fish, or if the fish is stressed, then the life cycle of the parasites go through what's called a dinoflagellate phase, which means it's a single-celled organism with a tail that's swimming around the tank. And if it does go through an appropriately sized UV sterilizer, such as 18 watts plus on a slow flow, then that should kill the parasites and reduce the chance of white spot. So anyway, the point that I'm trying to make with this little drawing is that everything you do is relative. The corals that you keep are relative to the light that you've got. The amount of fish that you have is relative to the amount of oxygen in the system and the filtration that you have. And all this equipment is really able to make your life easier. Or allow you to have more. Because if your tank's full, all this stuff's very important. If your tank's not real full, the stuff's not that important. The other thing you might do too is you might hook on an ozone. You might hook it onto this protein skimmer, for example, and then you might go and get yourself an ozone reactor. Ozone reactor is going to polish your water beautifully. You might hook that up to a redox meter. You've probably also got a pH probe, which is going to run your calcium reactor. So you can get so fancy, but you can also have it very simple. All relative. You can also get real fancy and put a dosing system on it. There's nothing else you can spend money on. So you might be dosing calcium if you do or don't have a reactor. You might be dosing various supplements, so therefore the tank can actually dose for you.